Great having you on, man. Thanks for being here. Just telling a little bit about, why don't you kind of, this is where I like to let people toot their own horn a little bit, talk about, how you got here, who you
Yeah.
are, how you're building momentum in your life, and how you're, where you're headed and how you're going to help other people build that same momentum.
I love the opportunity to toot my horn. I am awesome. I guess essentially I have a list of 100 things that I'm trying to do to be happier in life. So if you think bucket list, and it was inspired by, sadly, the loss of one of my close childhood friends growing up, called Chris. And I was 25 at the time; he was 24. And yeah, I learned that he had passed. I was in Canada. I'm obviously from Australia, as you might be able to tell. And yeah, I remember sitting there and just thinking about his life first and then my life. And I just wondered whether I was happy. And I realized that I wasn't. And it was the first time I had that perspective, that realization. So I had a quick reflect on my life and realized that there were many areas that I had not been honoring, I suppose. And I acknowledged what those aspects were, those core areas, and I decided to put goals towards each of those areas. And I suppose, if we talk about gamification, arguably a list is, one of the original ways of gamifying things to do. So, I just had a little checkbox next to each one, and I decided to prioritize that in my life. So I dropped everything 13 years ago, just 13 years and 4 days ago. And I decided to just go for this list. And I achieved many weird, abstract things. And fast forward now 13 years, it's been turned into a book and a TV show and documentaries. I get to do a lot of speaking about the concept of purpose and connection and all that stuff. And we get to support people. So we have a corporate wellness product. We have a bunch of stuff. It's not just about me anymore. It's about a wider community.
Dude, I love it. I mean, so your story, I feel like, and I've said this before on the show, but it's like so much of people that I see in our space, and I don't even like to use the word, I feel like there is no really good word for our space, but bottom line, momentum builders, people that are trying to improve their own lives, and they start to get it and it clicks, and then they go, damn, I want to help other people because it feels really good. Yeah. I don't like the word self-help. I don't even like the word wellness anymore. I just feel like it's just overdone, and there's so many people that are wellness experts. But anyways, people that are doing what you're doing, so much of that comes from like just a tragedy and sort of like that eye-opening event. And you're almost like mine. It was similar for me when I was in high school. I was suicidal, and I was literally at rock bottom, and I discovered I had a serendipitous moment that changed my life. And it's like, you almost wish that for people, right? Because it's like, if you don't have that type of awakening moment, a lot of time people just cruise through on that, like hovering above rock bottom, sort of just not really happy and good enough to be able to get by and sort of grin and bear it.
It's so true. It's, obviously, you wouldn't wish something bad upon someone, but it's interesting from a behavioral point of view that as people, we do tend to wait for a dark moment. And I often think about this. I speak about this. It's why do we wait? Why do we wait for something generally bad to happen for us to then consider something better? And I think what happens is adversity gifts us with perspective. It's a reminder. And you hear this story so often, in our society, someone who comes close to dying, someone who loses someone close to them, someone who's diagnosed with an illness, call it cancer. And they're the people who, if they're lucky enough to survive and come through the other end, they climb a mountain or write a book or go to school or start a family or say, I love you, or say, I'm sorry, or, whatever it might be. And I think it's adversity gifts that person perspective, a reminder that there's a ticking clock, a reminder that that clock is not one that we're in control of. We don't know how much time we have left, but we are in control of what we do with that time. And that's the moment where, you get to ask these kind of macro questions. What do I want to do with my one and only life? What do I want to do with my business? On a micro level, am I showing up? Am I being true to myself? Am I expressing myself? So a lot of these questions, and does that mean we have to wait for a shitty moment in our life? For most of us, it did for me, but the truth is you don't have to wait. You just give yourself permission.
So right. I want to pause here because I feel like this is a conversation I have over and over with people. And, you know, when you haven't had that moment, it's just, it is so much harder. And it's so easy for us to be like, you know, don't wait, just go do it. But it's almost like the way that we're wired in our brains, you know, going back thousands and thousands of years, is it's like we almost need something to sort of just shake us and go, whoa, step back and really take a look at your life. Because we get into these habits and these routines and we see one foot in front of us, and that's about as far as most people see. And it's just impossible or it's not impossible, but we make it impossible for ourselves to be able to kind of pivot and go, well, wait a minute, I'm doing this every single day, and this does not make me happy. And like we were talking about earlier with the cores, you know, I always say, you know, I've got my 5 cores, you've got your, you know, the things that you're focusing on and building goals around. We all have these values, these important things to us that it's like, okay, I've discovered these are universal. I call them universal principles. I didn't make up the name, but basically things that have been around since humans have been formed, and it's going to be around until the end. And they've proven themselves over and over and over again. Right. Yeah. And it's like, these are the things that have proven to make humans happy. Things like relationships, your physical health, your mindset, your career and your finances, your emotional health. And what are the habits that you currently have, and how do you, you know, pivot and start taking actions to change what you currently have. And so one of the things I like to do with people, I don't want to hear on your system how you help people to kind of get there without that jolting moment, is I encourage them to just briefly jot down what you want said at your funeral. Sounds kind of morbid. I call it the Back to the Future list to make it a little less morbid. But the idea is you're sort of flash forwarding to the end of your life, and you're going, all right, well, if I continue on this current path, where am I going to end up? This is what I want, where I want to be end up. This is what's important to me deep down inside, like all the bullshit aside, like without anybody distracting you or telling you anything, but this is what's important to you. And then you go, all right, how do I get there? So do you have something similar to that?
Yeah, for sure. And I love that you do that. You know, I think, you know, the pandemic, as an example, was something that did give a lot of people and a lot of businesses that shot of, oh my gosh, what's happening here? That adversity that's often needed. But yeah, if you don't have to wait for a bad moment. You don't have to wait for someone to die. As you say, I think there's a process. So I've broken it down with my business partner, Todd, into an 8-step process. So we've sort of gamified it in that sense. Step 1 is permission. You know, you're just sitting down and not waiting for someone to say, hey, think about yourself. You can do that yourself, whether you're an individual or a family or even a business. Step 2 is writing a eulogy. It's reflection. So to your point, your Back to the Future list. If you, for a moment, sit down, give yourself half an hour, and write an honest eulogy, not just a highlights reel, but, you know, what are the things that you kind of overlooked? And that will identify for you in a way core aspects, or what I would call the spokes to your wheel of life. You know, I did this as a 25-year-old, and my eulogy was pretty awful. You know, I wasn't the family member I wanted to be. I wasn't a great friend. I hadn't stayed in touch with people. I hadn't expressed myself. I never followed a dream. I always had self-doubt. I let fear drive me. So I had not a great kind of list, not a great eulogy. But then if you then look at your eulogy after you've written it, don't overly be critical to yourself. It's you're judging yourself, but not for any sort of, you know, critical punishment. You're just looking to see what themes come up. And we find, we've been doing this for 2 years now, there are 12 main spokes to your wheel of life. So again, another concept here. If you imagine a bicycle wheel and the spokes to that wheel give it structure and allow that wheel to roll, then you imagine your life to be that wheel. What are your spokes? What are the core aspects of your life? And if you've done a eulogy, you'll have a good idea. As you say, key relationships, personal development, professional development, career, travel.
Yeah, what are your 12? Sorry, a call was coming in and I thought my memory was off, but I don't know if you mentioned it. Do you want to go through the 12?
Yeah, I was just mentioning it a little. The key relationships, professional development, personal development, travel and adventure, creativity, social interaction, impact, volunteering. What else is on there? By the way, there are 12 most common shared, we find though that individuals have between 7 and 8.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I actually have this here. I just did this exercise for myself. And so these are I've got physical health, key relationships, career, personal development, travel and adventure, finance, love, creativity. And so once you establish those spokes, you can then attribute goals to strengthen each of them. We actually go through a process where you rate each spoke. So key relationships, how are you doing with your close friends? Whatever they are for you. And if it's a 2 out of 10, you realize, well, my wheel's not particularly healthy. So that's kind of the premise of the whole way we look now at building a list. The foundation to a meaningful list is an understanding of your spokes, of your core aspects, not just, a shotgun approach to spraying goals on a list.
Right. And so let's pause there for a second. So I think this is super important too. One of the things, so I mentioned briefly at the beginning how important goals are, but even more important is what you are basing your goals are, right? And so with me, it's these 5 cores but both of us has the same approach. Again, universal principles, they've been set in different ways, but at the end of the day, it's what's important, what if you were to take action and build momentum in, is going to make you the happiest, best version of yourself, right? And so, your spokes, my core, same concept, but, focusing and just stopping and actually stepping back and becoming aware of those things and understanding, like you said, I think that funeral exercise is kind of a good one because it forces you to sort of say, okay, well, what path am I currently on? And then now where do I want to be? And then you kind of reverse engineer and you go, all right, so what is it that I actually want? Okay, you've got travel and adventure on there, right? I'm a dad I just had my 3rd boy. Travel and adventure's not on my list. I would like it to be, but so for me, I get that same feeling of fulfillment and joy from different types of things, right? And so each person has to sort of say, okay, at the end of the list, so if it's at the end of the day, I want to be someone that's traveled to every country and has had all these great experiences. Then you start building your goals around that. Okay, country 1, like where am I going? When? And you got to be proactive and start scheduling these things into your life, because we all know, as we were just saying, if you don't, all of a sudden a year goes by and then 2 and then 3, and then all of a sudden you're at your funeral. It's like, yeah, he kind of sucked. He wasn't awesome. He kind of just skated through, and yeah, we'll kind of miss him. And I mean, honestly, to me, that's like the scariest thing I could possibly, like having 2 people at the funeral, one of them being my mom, the other one being my dog trainer. And it's like, no, you want a big full room and you want people being like, this guy did all these things. But for every single person, those are personalized and you got to find those.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I mean, I think that I like to think in a morbid kind of way. Imagine having a moment on your deathbed. You just have a quick moment as a last thought to reflect on your life and just ask yourself, would I have changed anything? And if you suddenly think, oh God, I would have changed everything, that's not a great last feeling. So how do you change that? How do you get into this position where you can reflect and go, I tried my very best at everything? And you get to change that by identifying goals now that are personally relevant and taking action, which I think is a really interesting thing. I have a list, a map with all my goals put out on there. And that pretty much for the first 3 years of this journey dictated what I did. I would visit an inmate on death row, which is on my list, number 11. And I would then get my map out and go, what can I do next?
Well, hold on. That's an interesting one. Let's not skip over that one. Why was that visiting an inmate on death row on your list?
Well, I think everyone's list is different. It's a relative concept. Right. And so for me, I'd lived a very sheltered life. I hadn't really done much. I hadn't experienced much. I'd been very much in a cocoon. So I just wanted to experience things and people that I had never come in touch with. So, amongst, some of the things on my list were marrying a stranger in Las Vegas, delivering a baby, living on a deserted island, walking across the country, posing nude at an art class, and many more. So they were very experiential. I'd never known anyone who'd gone to jail. And I thought, what would be the most extreme version of that? Death row. So I Googled death row inmates, thousands of people online who are death row inmates looking to communicate with people on the outside. And I just wrote a letter, a handwritten letter. They leave their address. So I wrote a handwritten letter and got a response 2 weeks later and started talking to this guy,
Wow.
James, or J-Lock, for a year. And then he invited me in, and I went to McAllister in Oklahoma to visit him. But it sort of touches on what you'd mentioned before, which is this point of action. It's so important. You know, a list is a list, and that looks good on a wall.
Right.
But
you actually, right. That you determined that was something that was important. You recognized that you didn't have that. You wanted to experience that to broaden your mind, understand, you know, that side of the equation more, and you proactively went out and did something. Right. The action is the key. We all have ideas, and I did this and I should do that, but it's actually going out and doing it. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and you can gamify that too. You know, like an action plan is, you know, as I would teach it in our course, it's that you understand the who, the what, and the when. Who are the people involved? What needs to be done? Just very practically, what needs to be done? Health is let's just say you want to do a marathon. Who is involved? Yourself, maybe a trainer, the organizer of the marathon. What needs to be done? Buy a ticket, get some running shoes, get off your ass and run for 6 months and train. And when? When can you start it? Now is usually the answer. And you have, you know, something like a marathon, there's a deadline. So you actually have a time frame to work with as well. So if you start thinking about all that sort of stuff for each of your goals, you start to put together a timetable, a schedule of meaningful things, because it all leads to, you know, where you want to go.
Right. And so how, like, well, hold on. I have one more question about the death row in Maine, because I think that's fascinating. I love that you did that. When you actually, and then I want to switch to, and remind me of this, how people listening, where to start doing all this. I think I have an idea based on what you said earlier. But so with the death row, when you met him in person, what did you ask him? And what was that experience like?
The experience was so surreal. I was living in Australia at the time, so I flew to Oklahoma City, got a rental car, drove for 2 hours to
wow, you flew to another country to do this.
Oh yeah, I'm committed. Yeah. So that was, it was one of the first things I did from my list when I 100% committed, actually. And then the rest just sort of flowed. You know, you talk about flow state. Like, yeah, that's very easy to achieve if you're committed to meaningful goals. That's why a list is important. But I drove to this weird little town. I had this huge penitentiary up on the hill as I drove towards it. I saw the shimmering of the barbed wire from miles away. Got there, I had to take my belt off. When you check in, give your phone away. They tell you what you can wear. It has to be very plain. And I went 5 levels down, underground. Went into this room with, on either side, there were 3 glass windows with a little stool in front of each one with a telephone next to each window. I was number 2, so I sat down and I looked through the window with reinforced glass, and it was empty when I got there, and I sat down. And then a moment later, this guy, J-Lock, who I'd been writing to for 12 months, walks through the door, sits down. We pound our fists, or whatever you call it, through the glass, and we'll pick up the telephone. And we spoke for 5.5 hours.
Wow.
About everything. You know, he's desperate for contact, so he asked me as many questions as I asked him. But it wasn't sort of like an interview. We just caught up. I ended up, you know, I was very curious about why he was in there. He'd always been a bit vague about that, so he sort of shared. He denied doing this crime. It was a murder. He denied it, but he told me his whole life story, from his history, and, you know, growing up in Oklahoma, and he had tattoos everywhere. He took his shirt off at one point. He got served food at one point, and I said, "Oh, can I see what you're eating?" So he showed me his little tray of food, which was very limited. He explained to me how, you know, you can still buy things in prison. There's still this sort of underground way of getting things. It's very hard on death row. But anyway, and then, you know, I told him about me. Oh, he showed me all his girlfriends. Quote unquote girlfriend. So, I mean, that was interesting. Again, for me, I just want to experience.
There's a whole thing there, right? Isn't there? There's women that are interested in death row inmates. That's a thing, right?
I mean, I don't know how much I can share here, but I met a lady in the reception when I was going in to see J-Lock, as I call him, and I said, "Oh, who are you here visiting?" And she said, "Oh, my husband." And I said, "Oh, I'm really sorry to hear that." And then I thought about what the response should have been, and I didn't really know, because obviously this guy's done something.
Yeah.
So long story short, she ends up sitting at window number 3 right next to me. So I'm speaking to J-Lock, and next to me, she's speaking to her husband. And J-Lock says to me, "Oh, do you want to know the story of the guy next to me?" And I say, "Yeah." She can't hear any of this, of course. And he goes, "Oh, well, he murdered someone, and he's not apologetic. He doesn't care." And I said, "No way." And he goes, "He's getting killed tomorrow." And so this lady had come in to see her husband for one final time, which is in itself is a very strange concept. You know, I again, death penalty to me doesn't really ring true. But just that, there are many ladies and men out there who are just so desperate to connect that they will look through things such as murder and connect with these people. I mean, I'm not a psychologist. I'm sure there's far more to it than that. But yeah, very interesting.
It's fascinating. Well, that's neat. I applaud you. I like hearing things like this because, right, again, to me, I think the key of this conversation is, you know, you took action. You were interested in something, and you opened your mind and had an experience that 99.999% of the rest of the world will never have. I'm sure you added some joy to this gentleman's life, whether I was going to say whether he deserved it or not, but again, I don't think that's the right thing to say. Who knows? But, you know, he's still a human being, right?
Yeah, he's actually off death row now, oddly. Again,
oh, wow.
I can talk to you about this story for hours. It's so weird.
Yeah, we'll have a side combo. But now I want to get back to some people watching goals. Let's go into these spokes. So earlier I said, how do people get started with your system? Is it to start filling out their spokes or what?
Yeah, I mean, look, so I'm not selling anything here. There's a process to it, and you know, we run people through that. That would be a very good way to do it. I would say though, for someone who just wants to start in this moment right now, get a piece of paper, get a pen, turn your phone off, turn everything off, and just give yourself half an hour, 15 minutes. Give yourself 10 minutes to just start writing down a few goals that are sitting in the recesses of your mind. If you ask someone what's on their list, 90% of people will say, "Oh, I don't know," which is crazy. They do know. We're not in a society where people are often saying, "Hey, here's permission to think. What do you want to do?" So, you know, premise it however you like. If you had $1 million, what would you do? If nothing was impossible, what would you do? If you had a week left to live, what would you, however you want to sort of get that creativity going. Goals do not have to be life-changing. You don't have to cure cancer. You can, and wow, wouldn't that be a feat? But you can also, we find, I mean, the majority of goals are, you know, as I said, there's travel, there's love, there's personal development, professional development. A lot of them are increase or improve my boundaries in my life. Get rid of the self-doubt that I have. And there's ways to do all this, and they can be goals as well. So goals don't have to be life-changing. They just have to be personally relevant. So whatever it is, start writing your goals down. So let's just say you start with 5. Write 5 things down. Say, "I love you." Date nights. Get healthier. But be specific. That's the other thing with goal setting. You want to be specific. What's getting healthier? What does that mean to someone? For someone, it's
right. So you start with the big concept, right? And just let me second what you're saying. Putting it down on paper is so important. It makes it real. It makes it tangible. People don't understand that. You can be thinking things all you want, and actually, what that ends up doing is causes anxiety and angst and frustration and inner conflict in you because you're like, I have these thoughts and I know I should be doing something, but you're not doing anything about it and they're just floating around in your head. So you get them down on paper. Just doing that feels a lot better. And then, as you said, yeah, you know, putting these bigger concepts first, like, okay, I want $1 million. And I thought that was a good example because it's like, okay, why do you want $1 million? Right? Yeah. Do you want $1 million because that's the society we live in and you feel like money is the answer to everything? What are you going to do with that $1 million? And is that really, this is the question I like to ask people is that really going to move the needle on your happiness? Like long term, like, you know, like, yes, money. And I won't go into this, but I took the Yale happiness course, the science of well-being. I highly recommend it to anybody. And they had a huge section. It's the most popular course. It's a free online course that's ever been made. It's on Coursera. And it talks about this miswanting that we have and how we're just obsessed, especially in the United States, but the world, you know, depending on where you are. Australia, you know, capitalist society, I'm sure it's probably pretty similar. But basically with these miswantings of thinking that if only I had this, if only I had, you know, $1 million, a bigger house, a bigger car, and we, you know, keeping up with the Joneses, we think that that's going to make us happy. And at the end of the day, it's really these other things. And they kind of go through and they do experiment after experiment in the course of what actually makes us happy. And what we think is going to make us happy, 9 times out of 10 doesn't actually. So it's good to get it on paper, see it for what it is, and then kind of break down, like you're starting to say. I'll let you finish more specifically into what does that actually mean for you.
Yeah, I mean, look, you're right. By the way, Harvard research suggests that by writing down a goal, just writing it down, you're 42% more likely to achieve it. Sharing that goal with someone verbally, 65% more likely to achieve it. And then actually having an accountability buddy, which we can talk about too if you like, increases the chances by 95%. So an accountability buddy is someone who you ask to be your accountability buddy specifically, and you outline what that is for you. If it's going skydiving, that's on your list. You have an accountability buddy. Maybe it's someone to drive you there or jump with you, or someone to make sure that in a week you've booked the ticket, whatever that is. But ongoing conversation with one person.
Oh, that's magic. Having somebody else, right? Accountability, and the word itself is in there. I mean, that's what it is. It's basically, because left to our own devices, we come up with excuses, and I'm too busy, and I did. But if you've got somebody else that's holding your feet to the fire, it's magical. Just like writing things down, because number one, they're there to say, "Hey, you said you're going to do this," and number two, we're all creatures of ego, and we don't want to let other people down, right? We don't want to look bad. We don't want to look like the guy that didn't live up to his word, or the girl that didn't do what she said she was going to do. So it's like that's why 95%, I hadn't heard that, but I believe it. It's like hell or high water, we're going to figure out a way how to do something if we've committed to this other person, versus committing to ourselves. Oh, so what? I broke it. Who cares?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, as we've already established, action differentiates a dream to an accomplishment, or a goal to an achievement. Without action, our goals just sit there idle. And many of us, I certainly did that up until the age of 25. So if action is the key word here, the operative word, the thing that really allows us to actually progress. The person at the top of the mountain walked there. The CEO of a company worked hard to get there. The person who finished a marathon started the marathon. It's so important that we take action. Now, I've done many things for my goals, and of course we're in a community of people who are all doing the same, and I've seen that there are 3 key steps, I would say, to creating momentum in that action. I think the first one is coming up with a fail-proof first step. So let's just say everyone listening now has got their bit of paper, they've got 5 goals down. I urge that person to pick a goal. Pick one of those goals and commit to it. The first step is to create a fail-proof action point. Whatever that, if someone wants to read 12 books a year, very common, 1 book a month, don't worry about 12 books, don't even worry about 1 book. Start with a paragraph. Say, I'm going to read a paragraph, and that's it. That just creates momentum. Step 2 is get an accountability buddy. I cannot emphasize this enough. It's crucial. It's absolutely crucial. And step 3 is just commit to an amount of time, whether that's a day, a week, a month. Commit to that amount of time, and that will just get it will just get the needle moved just 1% in the right direction, and that'll start a chain reaction. And you talk about feel good, and this, ultimately we want to be happy. What's actually happening from a chemical point of view is there's serotonin and dopamine, as you know, that's released in the body when you set and strive for a meaningful goal. That's feeling. What is feeling good? Feeling good is the release of these chemicals in our body. And again, science shows that from the moment you identify a goal, serotonin, which serotonin itself actually reduces anxiety, regulates depression. It makes us feel good. It makes us feel confident. Our self-efficacy goes through the roof. Dopamine is a motivator. It actually fires us up. It becomes very addictive. Both of these chemicals are released as soon as you write down a goal, not just when you achieve a goal, but right at the beginning and all the way through the goal striving process. So if you're trying to do something, you're releasing these chemicals all the way along. We start to feel good. And so if you pick one goal from that bit of paper, you commit to it, and you just take one step in the right direction, you'll feel good. So in an age where mental wellness after a 2-year pandemic is such a current issue, and people often are, of course, how do I feel better? Come up with one meaningful goal and take one step in that direction. And that'll start a really positive chain reaction.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Simple, right? I want to emphasize something that you said. Taking those really small steps, right? Because again, it's human nature. It's been proven scientifically that if we say, I want to start reading more, and then we buy like 5 books and they're in front of us, and we're like, I need to be reading like a book a week. You get overwhelmed. It's too much, and you're like, I'm not going to do that. But if your goal is like literally like 1 minute a day or 2 pages a day, like then you get in the habit, and then that starts to build, as you said, that momentum. And once you've developed the habit, you're off to the races, right? And then all of a sudden you kind of get greedy for it. You want more of it. It's like, well, I want to read 5 pages. I want to read 10 pages. I want to read a whole chapter. I want to read. And then you're in the habit of reading. But starting small is key. We got to wrap this up. I want to add my last question. I always like to ask people, since this is about, habits and gamification is kind of my thing. You've kind of already mentioned some of the ways that you're gamifying what you're doing. Would you say is the top habit that you feel like you've developed over the course of your life that maybe at one point it was a failure habit, and then you've now translated it into a success habit that's helped you to get to where you are? And caveat, how might you have gamified that? In other words, reduce the friction for yourself to make it easier to actually develop that habit.
Yeah, well, I would say, it sounds like quite cliche because I'm the guy who has a list, but creating a list, creating a list, again, to reinforce, based off doing the work to understand core aspects or spokes of my life, but having a list front and center of my mind. I have my list on a wall. I've got my 3-month, again, just to show anyone who's just, I've got my 3-month sort of goals here, and having a checkbox after them, and it puts it front of mind. If you're able to see your goal every single day, whether it's in your bathroom, if you put a list, or in your office, in the car, on the back of the fridge, it's changed everything for me. Absolutely. I mean, the other thing also is, I suppose, talking about it. Accountability buddy, yes, but what happened with my story was, as soon as people heard my list and it was on TV and it was in a book, I was flooded with people who wanted to help me. So it's a really interesting conversation just to have as well. But sorry, to go back to your question, creating a list and putting it front and center somewhere where I can always look at it, because it's a form of accountability.
Right. Just get it. Like we were saying earlier, right? That is a way to gamify your progress, your success, your happiness. You just write it down, get that list going, and stick to that list, and prioritize is another one, because as your list is going to grow, and the last thing you want to do is, all of a sudden you get lost in the sea of like, there's all these things I want to do, like, but you need to step back and say, okay, what is the most important to me? Like, what's going to move the needle in my happiness and my growth? So thank you very much for sharing. Somebody did have a quick question. World Lamy, I'll let you answer it. She says, I used to be very active. I trained 2 times per day, started a business I lost, but I still keep moving. But suddenly, after many problems, I lost my confidence and energy, and I don't have goals anymore. What would you tell her?
Well, whoever that is, feel free to send me a message. I'd love to help out. I think, again, it's I think the North Star is having a meaningful goal. So the process I would suggest would be to write a eulogy, identify things you've done well, talk about the things that she's just shared, the loss of the business, how that impacted her and where she is right now. As you said, it's about reflecting and then seeing where we are right now. Am I happy? Yep. Am I present? Am I performing? Am I proud? And then if I keep going this direction, will I be happy? Now, the answer seems to be no for that lady, which is such an amazing, valuable bit of feedback. So how would we change that? What change needs to occur right now? So, change is the vehicle for progress and for transformation. Sorry, I should say goals are the vehicle for progress and transformation. So it's a goal setting exercise, I would imagine, starting with something simple, identifying one thing, even if it's eating healthy for one day. Yeah, these things will be very simple, and just to get that ball rolling. But very happy to help that lady privately if she wants to reach out.
Thank you. And then where can people find you?
My website is sebastianterry.com. It's actually my speaking website. I have a website for organizations called 100things.com. But yeah, my Instagram, I mean, my number's 323, whatever. Yeah, people can get in touch with me however they like. So I'm around.
Perfect. Yeah, and we'll put that information up on here. Well, Sebastian, this was awesome. Right. I feel like you're the type of guy we could chat for probably another
Yeah, thanks, Will. I really appreciate it, mate.
Yeah, man. Thanks for coming on, and put another shrimp on the bar. Every time somebody says they're from Australia, I think of that line.
I think it's the
Dumb and
Austrians
Dumber.
who do that.
Go ahead.
I think it's the Austrians who do that.
Right. Well, she was from Austria, and then isn't it? But isn't that Australians that actually say that? And the whole point is he said it to an Austrian, but it should have been Australian.
Yeah. That was
Maybe I missed that joke my whole life. Anyways.
No. It was a Dumb and Dumber reference. And by the way, we don't even call them shrimp. We call them prawns. It's a misnomer. The Australians barbecue shrimp. It's not what we would say. But thank you.
All right, man. Great chatting with you, brother. Thanks for everybody who joined in, and we'll talk soon, man.
Thanks, Will. Bye, mate.
All right. Take care. Bye.
That's it for the 5 Core Life. If you haven't already, go ahead and hit that like button on this video and pound that subscribe button so you get notified when new episodes drop. Also, please fill out the free 5 Core Life Evaluator quiz. It's a great way to get a baseline of where you are in the 5 cores and which of the 5 cores you need support. In addition, you'll get some actionable advice that you can apply and start improving your life in the areas that you need it most. That's it for today's episode of the 5 Core Life Podcast. Have a wonderful day.
Get moving. Gain momentum. Join the movement. Join Emmett by going to moremomentum.com to take a free life evaluator quiz on where you currently stand in each of your 5 cores.